Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. What a fascinating individual, Robin Pacific, and I think a fascinating interview with her about her book Skater Girl, but also, frankly, more importantly, about her life that is reflected a little bit, if not a lot, in her book Skater Girl. But I think really comes across in my conversation with her tonight in regards to her political leanings, which are reasonably left-wing, Marxist-Leninist at a time, her attitude toward religion and spiritualism, this spiritual listening that she does, and then also, pretty frank conversation about geopolitics and what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Eastern Europe, etc. So I wanted to say a few words about some of these topics as we close this evening. I think that hearing from different people is really helpful in life. And I remember that I was chairman of Transit Alliance during a mayoralty election in Toronto. And we invited different representatives of all the different parties and different viewpoints to come and speak with us. And we had someone from a Marxist-Leninist come. And it was absolutely fascinating to listen to someone who I was prepared to dismiss and completely not accept any of their thinking, but they were incredibly socially interested and concerned and worried about those that were less fortunate in our society. They had some solutions that were very extreme and I didn't agree with. And so I think their intellect may have been wrongly placed, but their heart was actually in the right place. And it was fascinating. And they were incredibly articulate and passionate. And it was really helpful hearing what they had to say, even though clearly it was an opinion that in general I disagreed with. But I think I was better for having the opportunity to listen to them. I think that the conversation we had tonight about the difference between religion and spiritualism, again, was fascinating. I think I've always been someone that's believed in a God that was more akin to the Force from Star Wars, the force for goodness, this force for positive change in our society, than less about, an old man in a beard with a beard sitting on a cloud that was an interventionist that you could pray to and you could win a football game. And if you got through to him. And so, my sense of God personally is more like, as I said, the Star Wars, the Force be with you, than necessarily with sort of the God of maybe Catholicism would be the best example. Robin calls that spiritualism, not religion, which is kind of an interesting take on things. So does that mean that I'm a spiritualist, not not someone that believes in religion, even though I go to church most Sundays and really enjoy the participation in and the belief in and the faith in my religion and my devotion to my religion? And then we had this really interesting conversation about the Middle East. And she used some language that was pretty strong and derogatory to describe not only Hamas, which I think was completely appropriate, but also the current Israeli government, which I'm not sure is appropriate. In fact, I think might be a little bit extreme. But it's telling that so many people feel that way. And frankly, a lot of Israelis, protests and someone in the war cabinet, who is a centrist who just resigned. I'm not sure they would call him a fascist, but certainly they would call him inappropriate things and worry that he is prolonging this war for his own personal benefit. And so struggling through to figure out what is the solution and how you can be disgusted with October the 7th and what Hamas did, but also at the same time think what's going on in Gaza is completely inhumane and wrong. And and holding both truths is difficult, but I think it's appropriate. And too many people want to have only one or the other belief. But I think a reasonable person would say both are wrong. And I guess, the struggle is this justification that the Israelis have that if Hamas is actually using civilians to shield themselves and to hide hostages, does that give them the justification for the death and destruction that they are waging upon Gaza? And they obviously believe it does. And there's a whole bunch of people across the world that are protesting that believe it doesn't. And so it's a really tough situation. And I wonder if October the 7th had occurred in the United States, what the American response would have been. If October the 7th had happened in Russia, what would the Russian response had been? And I kind of think that, the commentary that says that Biden believes potentially that America overreacted on September 11th when attacked by Osama bin Laden and his gang and caused, wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, is there any justification to compare deaths in Afghanistan and Iraq and what was it, 20, 25 years of continued war with what's going on in Gaza? And so, and if one country and group overreacts, does that justify other people overreacting, or does it give an example that overreaction is not appropriate? Or if it happens over and over again, is that not overreaction? It's just reaction. So I'm really struggling here because I think that the death of innocent civilians in Gaza is horrific. And the starvation and the destruction of homes and cities and workplaces and lives and families is a tragedy beyond belief. But I can understand completely the justification for wanting to eradicate Hamas. And so, again, I think that Robin Pacific puts it in a good situation, a great description of these two realities that are both absolutely disgusting and terrible. She calls them fascist. Is maybe appropriate. And so I guess the bottom line that I wanted to say is I really enjoyed listening to Robin Pacific. And hopefully you did too. I think that listening to different voices is incredibly helpful in our lives. I worry that too often we live in echo chambers and we only listen to people that have views very similar to ours. But to actually have someone with 5 doctoral or postgraduate degrees, a avowed Marxist-Leninist, someone who believes in theology and religion, but spiritualism, who has some really left-wing radical ideas, it's really helpful to listen to them and hear what she has to say and contemplate them and not dismiss them, but ask yourself how and why people feel this way. The best example I've got is, again, I've said this before, during the trucker occupation in Ottawa, I disagreed with what they were doing, but I thought they had some interesting and ideas and points that deserve to be heard. And the public opinion polls said that 15% of Canadians supported them. So it's not a majority. It's not even close to a majority. But 15% is like, 4.5, 5 million people. That's a significant number of people. And so if you've got a minority view with a strong point of view, not only do you deserve to be listened to, but I think that we, as the rest of society, have a responsibility to give those individuals an opportunity to speak. And I think the Prime Minister made a huge mistake not listening to them and dismissing them. And it's sort of back to the Hillary Clinton description in, when was it, 2016, where she called a certain group of society the deplorables. I don't think you can have that attitude. I'm sure you can't have that attitude. And I think that's one of the reasons why she lost. I think that everyone needs to be listened to. And I'm not for a second suggesting that Robin Pacific is an extremist in any way, shape, or form. But a Marxist-Leninist is probably a minority position. I hope to give numerous different people from different points of view, different segments of society, different places in the spectrum of our political thought, an opportunity to chat on my show and to be listened to. And hopefully you'll listen to them and give them a chance. Because as my boss, my former boss, Jimmy Patterson, used to always say, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and ears that are always open and a mouth that can and should close. And so listening is really helpful. So thank you, Robin Pacific, for talking, and thank you all for listening. I'll remind you I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online at saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody. Appreciate you joining me. Thanks.